Hello my quarantine neighbors. So no new music for you today. I thought I'd do something a little different. Go back to old roots because turns out, as much of a goofball and humorous as I can be, I'm actually a nerd. I'm actually fairly intelligent and have passion and knowledge on various subjects. So I will put on my scholarly spectacles, because I can't see a damn thing without them anyway, and I'm gonna educate you today on some art history. So the pieces we'll be going over today are from the artist formerly known as Prince of the Hudson River School, Thomas Cole's The Course of Empire. Now, I took 3 semesters worth of art history classes, which doesn't nearly qualify me enough to even be talking about this, but this series and other landscape paintings always stood out to me because they are, well, one, they're beautiful, and they depict man's adaptation and destruction of God's natural world over time. And with all that's going on in the world with the coronavirus, it's kind of interesting to look back at, the 19th century when these paintings were first commissioned and see how people back then, even back then, were worried about the environment and the rise and fall of civilization, and ultimately realized that the earth is a self-correcting ecosystem and it will heal, it will recover, and will leave no trace of mankind behind when we're gone. Except maybe TikTok videos. That being said, I'll try and make this video as quick and in-depth as possible, because frankly, I have to use the little boys' room, and it's not number 1, so let's get started. So real quick about the Hudson River School, not actually a school. The Hudson River School was an art movement during the 1800s from about 1825 to 1880-ish that aimed to turn away from European roots and ultimately heed towards the love of untamed nature in the New World and act as a cultivation for a new art style that was uniquely American. Thomas Cole is recognized as the founder of the Hudson River School because his paintings are the earliest depictions of that type of style. It also helped that Cole moved to New York City in 1825, where he began selling his landscape paintings. He had the Catskills, pre-national parks, and other areas within the Hudson River Valley to draw inspiration from, so hence the name Hudson River School. Now I gotta set the mood a little bit, set the timeline, what we're dealing with here. We're talking about early 1800s, which means we are smack in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. Railroads and textile factories are being developed. Coal consumption is ruining and polluting the environment. Deforestation is occurring. And so it was these artists, like Thomas Cole, who didn't like the ravages of industry. There was only a handful of people that actually appreciated nature for what it was, while the other half pretty much saw land as property and a source of the hell is that noise? A source of raw materials. And just as a side note, Thomas Cole did not like President Andrew Jackson and sought to explore the dangers of democracy in a lot of his artwork, which we'll see in The Course of Empire. As far as a particular art movement that we're going in, as I said, the Hudson River School is an art movement of its own, but we're coming from a classic kind of art, Classicism. So we go from the classic art movement of the Greco-Roman days, which put emphasis on the idealistic look of human anatomy and perfect proportions. But then we get to the Renaissance, which is a rebirth of the old classic art movement, now turning into Classicism. So Classicism, taken from classic art, put emphasis on restrained emotion, simplicity, structure, perfection, and typically the subject was of biblical or historical times. So you have to remember at this time too that America isn't completely developed yet. I mean, the East Coast is pretty urbanized at this point, but manifest destiny and expansion westward into the wild hasn't completely happened yet. Whereas Europe contains thousands of years of traces of civilization and ruins. So because America is a world of uncultivated land, unlike England, the movement by the Hudson River School artists was more as a preservation of God's original texts and the natural architecture of the world. So it was rather scrutiny to nature and attempting to interpret it that developed into Romanticism, the next art movement, which, opposite of Classicism, put emphasis on individualism, national identity, and more importantly, emotion through aesthetic experiences. My eyes are bugging out of my head because it's probably like 3 o'clock in the morning right now. Oh my god. So like I said, because we're in the middle of kind of Classicism and Romanticism, this whole new thing going on, people weren't rushing to it at first. So it's easy to see why this idea of the sublime landscape and divine aspect picked up in America rather than in Europe. It's kind of this beauty in art that makes even us today want to travel, and well, not travel now with the coronavirus. This is why people today want to see the world, whether you enjoy going to the beach or deserts or mountains. It's beautiful in its own unique way. So as all this is going on, Thomas Cole believes that the grandeur and purity of America and its landscapes are slowly vanishing and being taken over by cultivation of land and industry. And it's this idea that brings us to his first series of allegorical paintings, The Course of Empire. Now, this is a direct quote from Thomas Cole describing the artwork that was being commissioned for the patron Luman Reed, and he was a grocery millionaire. Whatever that means in the 1800s, the history of a natural scene as well as an epitome of man, showing the natural changes of landscape and those affected by man in his progress from barbarism to civilization, to the state of luxury, to the vicious state or state of destruction, etc. The paintings were commissioned for $5,000, which was a huge sum of money back then, and they were going to be arranged around Luman Reed's fireplace as depicted in Thomas Cole's 1833 sketch here. Paintings took 3 years to complete and were completed in 1836. Cole was deeply influenced by a prior trip to Europe, which, when we look at the paintings, you'll see explains his use of remnants of structures and civilizations of European times. So without further ado, finally, let's jump into painting number 1.
Alright, so this is the Savage State. This is the first painting in the Course of Empire series, and as I mentioned before, this is an allegorical series, which means we're going to be telling the story over time and see how things have changed throughout this particular made-up landscape. So the way we know that it's going to be the same landscape in every painting is based on this rock formation in the background here with this little boulder. Ooh, look at that zoom. Oh my god, look at the details. Yeah, so this is not necessarily the focal point of every painting, but we'll notice this in the background, and we'll see how everything changes around it. Another thing to keep in mind is the position of the sun in every painting. So right now, because this is the first painting, we're dealing with dawn. It's the sun is just starting to rise into a almost blue sky to the left here, and symbolizing as we get to the right, as we get more towards the future, it gets cloudy and there's a storm going on, so indicating that the future is probably going to be a little rough. We'll see how that pans out. But Savage State, main thing to take away is that everything is pretty wild. So we're talking about unsettled land. As you can see, this is going to be like a city center here, but because we're talking about primitive times where everything's nomadic, so there's no permanent settlements. We've got teepees here, people around a fire. We're in the hunter-gatherer stage of time, so we've got these guys in the background hunting, and the main guy over here with wearing like a skin fur coat type thing, although it's not really a coat because you can see his biceps and stuff, and he's pretty swole. He's hunting this poor little Bambi guy over here, shot him, took an arrow to the knee, and he's probably dead. He's probably gonna eat him later. Sorry, spoiler alert, Bambi's mom. And that's pretty much it. We've got canoes over here in the river. Everything is just overgrown, wild. This is truly God's original text. Now moving on to the second painting in the series, this is the Arcadian or Pastoral State, they call it. And as you can see, some things have changed. We've still got our rock formation over here, but our position has changed where we've moved more down the river. This is where the teepees were in the last painting, but it is now a permanent Stonehenge-like structure. So we're seeing the development of technology, and obviously they're no longer nomadic. They're beginning to settle. We've got these cool sailboats as opposed to the canoes. So there's boat building over here. There's flocking going on. So he's got sheep over here and horseback riding over here. When we look over here, I mean, the grass is obviously, it looks like it's been mowed, freshly mowed. The trees are trimmed nicely, and that's all due to this guy. He's been working hard all day with his plow and his ox, and no one appreciates him, but that's okay because I do. Like I said, technology is advancing, and we can kind of see that with this Socrates-looking guy drawing a geometric shape in the ground, showing like the development of math and science. We've got the arts forming, so people are dancing over here, some guy playing the flute, and there's a guy back here like on his iPhone, I don't know, DMing your girl or something. I don't really know what he's doing, but he's got some sheep around him too. And one thing I also noticed, actually, like just the amount of times I've looked at this painting, this guy, he kind of is camouflaged, but we've got like a warrior here. So one soldier, and we're gonna see how that changes in the next couple paintings. But this, what to take away from this painting is the peace and harmony of the land. So we have a perfect balance between cultivation and the natural landscape. We got a child down here drawing like Doodle Bob from SpongeBob. And if you look at the faces, Thomas Cole admits himself that he was not really good at painting faces. So even though this was like after the Renaissance, we don't really have that kind of Renaissance-y look. It looks a little two-dimensional on the face. But I'm not judging him. I'm saying that's what he said. I can't draw for crap, so good on him. But yeah, that's the Arcadian state. Okay, now this is the Consummation of Empire. The sun is pretty much, we're at like a high noon, which is always like a typical Wild West thing, showing that disaster's coming. So this painting takes a lot of Roman influence from it, obviously, with the columns and the structures and the statues. Here's our mountain, our constant mountain that's in every painting, and as you can see now is beginning, there's development on the mountain itself. So we've got like this Great Wall of China looking thing going around to the top by the boulder, and there's tons of people around. And this is kind of showing how this kind of populist movement has led to like a mob rule. We got all these people, they're obviously in a celebration. We'll get into the foreground in a minute, but there's all these people on top of these structures watching, and what they're watching is this lovely parade going on this bridge. Bridge will be important in the next painting, but we can see who's the most important figure. This guy. He's supposed to be Caesar, but at the same time, he might as well have been Andrew Jackson, because this is how Thomas Cole is exploring the dangers of democracy. So we've got, our ruler and all his slaves around, all his potential corrupt senators. We can see more warriors that are here. These guys on top here are playing their trumpets in a triumphant victory. There's just a lot of detail in this painting that I could zoom in forever. But I mean, we can see obviously the technological advances, the boats. We went from canoes in the Savage State to these like Viking looking boats. I swear I find new things every time I look at this and like zoom in. And before we get into the next painting, another foreshadowing is going to be this scene right here. So we've got maybe like two brothers, it looks like, staging a naval battle, and that just shows the development of what they're looking at as far as their generation. The earlier generation went, they're taking that even further, and they're being influenced by this conquering and dividing, I should say. So this is the fourth painting in the series. This is called Destruction, and it is kind of a gruesome scene, but main thing, there's our mountain peak in the background there. Probably what you notice at first is probably this guy over here, which is, it's a statue obviously, but he's beheaded and he's kind of just flailing his arms out in a hopeless defense right now, and that's to show the uncertainty of the future and what's to come. Our triumphant bridge where we had Caesar marching across has collapsed under all these armies, these enemy armies that have invaded, and there's a lot of killing going on. We see all the fires over here in the background. Women are being raped by these vandals, and we've got, I mean, it's just very gruesome. There's a lot of dead bodies on the ground. There's a dead baby. This is just to explore how bad things have gotten in this so-called civilized society with all this urban development. But yeah, it truly is destruction, and there seems like there's no hope at all for the future. And then we get to Desolation. This is the last painting in the entire series, and it is probably my favorite just because of the symbolism behind it. So the sun has completely set now. Right, we went through an entire cycle. The moon is out over here, reflecting off the water. There is not a human being in sight. We've got our mountain over here. We're kind of in the same position. We have a little bit of the bridge from before that's left over. Our focal point is this one column that has stood the face of time. But the reason this one's my favorite is because it shows just how overgrown things are becoming again. So we're kind of like getting the Savage State, the first painting, back in, and nature is just taking over. So whatever, it's leaving no trace of mankind behind, basically. It just goes to show that no matter how bad we as a species ruin this planet, once we're gone, everything will regrow, everything is coming back, and that's symbolized by this stork over here, showing like the rebirth of society. You know, the birds have kind of returning. Got an animal, another stork over here.
Well, that's kind of all I have to say about all these paintings and this whole Hudson River School movement. So I hope you enjoy that. It's kind of hard to get everything, as much information as possible, because this is a short video and there is, trust me, tons of information on this that you could go read about or even go into a museum and look. Hopefully this gives you a nice little foundation or taste of the course of empire and how it relates to today. So if you like this video and you want to see more kind of things like this, I know this is something new I'm doing, so I don't have a true structure of how I want to do things, and plus I don't like staring at the camera and talking. Drop a comment or give me a like. And if people find this interesting, then maybe I'll start developing a new series of educational type of videos. I hope you all are staying safe and entertained in this quarantine, and I will see you in the next video.